The stars above Luna Base looked calm that morning, silent pinpricks of light scattered across the void. To anyone else, the heavens might have seemed peaceful. But Commander Jake Morrison had spent enough years staring into that darkness to know better. Quiet skies rarely meant safety. More often, they meant that something was hiding just beyond the edge of perception. In the command center, Morrison sat hunched over his console, nursing his third cup of coffee. His crew worked with the quiet discipline of routine, updating star charts, cross-checking navigation data, and calibrating the deep space sensors that scanned the outer solar system. This had been their life for 5 years, watching, waiting, preparing for a threat no one on Earth truly believed would come. And then Lieutenant Amy Chen broke the silence. She approached his station with a data pad in hand, her brow furrowed in the way Morrison had come to recognize. Chen was brilliant, meticulous, and calm under pressure. But whenever numbers refused to align with her models, she carried that unmistakable look of quiet dread. Without a word, she placed the pad on his desk and gestured to the sensor readings. The numbers told a story Morrison didn't want to believe. Strange energy signatures, far too structured to be natural, were flaring at the edge of the solar system. Not one object, but many. And each was enormous. "Something's moving toward us," she said finally, her voice low. "And it's not an asteroid field." Morrison studied the patterns. The formation was too precise, too deliberate. The signals were artificial, ships. Thousands of them. His stomach sank. Humanity had waited centuries for confirmation that they were not alone in the universe. That confirmation had now arrived, not as a whisper of peaceful discovery, but as the roar of an oncoming storm. Within an hour, Morrison ordered a full-spectrum scan. Every sensor Luna Base possessed, from long-range gravitational detectors to thermal imaging satellites, was pointed toward the approaching anomaly. The results came back, and with them, the silence in the command center deepened. 50,000 vessels. Each massive, each bristling with power, moving in perfect synchronization. A fleet. A war machine. They would reach Earth in just 72 hours. Captain Ben Rodriguez, monitoring communications from Earth and the colonies, arrived at Morrison's side. His screens showed no sign that the planet below had any idea what was approaching. Families ate breakfast. Cities bustled with traffic. News networks debated politics, economics, and sports. Humanity continued its daily routines, unaware of the shadow falling toward them. Amy Chen began running defensive simulations, trying to calculate what humanity's weapons could do against such overwhelming force. The answer was obvious before the numbers even processed: not enough. Not nearly enough. Morrison stared at the tactical display showing the incoming armada. He had always imagined that first contact might come as a message, a probe, or perhaps a single exploratory ship. Instead, the galaxy had introduced itself with a fleet so vast it could blot out the stars. And in that moment, he knew, humanity was about to face its first and perhaps final test. Within minutes, Luna Base's report reached Earth. President Linda Carter sat in the Oval Office, reading the briefing that confirmed humanity's worst fears. For 6 years she had led through disasters, economic collapse, wars, climate crises, but nothing in her life had prepared her for this. The classified photographs showed the alien fleet in chilling clarity. Great steel leviathans gliding through the dark, each dwarfing Earth's largest space stations. 8 billion lives now rested on the decisions she would make in the coming hours. She called an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council. Leaders from every nation appeared via secure links, their faces reflecting the same grim realization. The debate fractured quickly, some urged for diplomacy, others demanded immediate military preparation. The council had been built for moments of global crisis, but never for one like this. President Carter listened, weighed, and considered. But in her heart, she already knew that history would not remember the arguments in this room. It would remember humanity's answer. Far beyond Earth, Admiral Vexer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the spearpoint of the Zephyrian Collective. He watched Earth grow larger on his main display, a pale blue orb adrift in a sea of black. To him, it looked fragile. Defenseless. His intelligence reports confirmed what he already suspected: the humans possessed only primitive rockets, crude satellites, and chemical weapons. Nothing worthy of fear. The collective had conquered 47 worlds before this one. Earth would be number 48. Vexer expected the humans to surrender, as nearly every civilization did once they saw the full weight of his fleet. Those who chose to resist never lasted more than a few hours. His tactical officer reported a rise in human communications, radio signals, satellite transmissions, spiking in frequency as they detected the approaching armada. Vexer allowed himself a thin smile. Panic and confusion. Exactly as expected. He opened a channel, broadcasting the same ultimatum he had used countless times before. Surrender to the Zephyrian Collective. Accept subjugation. Or be destroyed. President Carter received the alien message in the White House Situation Room. The voice that spoke was cold, mechanical, stripped of emotion. It demanded submission. It promised fire. The leaders around her exchanged grim looks. Generals, admirals, scientists, all waiting for her response. General Pete Adams gave a silent nod. Admiral Morrison, appearing on the screen from Luna Base, sat in quiet resolve. Humanity's guardians were ready to stand. Carter approached the console. She did not deliberate. She did not waver. Her words would be broadcast not only to the alien fleet, but across every human frequency. The invaders wanted clarity. They would have it. Come and take it. 3 words, echoing across the stars. 3 words that carried with them centuries of human defiance. Admiral Vexer received the reply. For the first time in his long career, he felt something unusual: surprise. Most species begged. Others negotiated. The humans had done neither. They had answered with war. He dismissed the defiance as arrogance. Primitive creatures often overestimated themselves before their inevitable collapse. Earth would be no different. He ordered the fleet into attack formation. Planetary bombardment would begin within hours. Earth would burn. But what Vexer did not know, what none of the Zephyrians knew, was that humanity had been preparing for this moment far longer than he imagined. Beneath the illusion of fragility, Earth had teeth. And the invaders had walked directly into a trap. The galaxy expected Earth to kneel. For 500,000 years, the Zephyrian Collective had ruled without challenge. They were not the largest empire, nor the most advanced, but they were feared. And fear was enough. Civilizations that resisted were erased. Worlds that stood defiant were left as ruins, silent warnings to the next. So when the Zephyrians demanded Earth's submission, the galaxy thought it was already decided. One more primitive world swallowed by the long night of empire. But humanity did not kneel. Humanity prepared. The silent calculus. On Luna Base, Admiral Morrison spoke in hushed tones with Generals Rodriguez and Chen. Every simulation ended the same: the Zephyrian fleet would arrive in overwhelming force. 50,000 ships. Carriers the size of cities. A flagship that could shatter continents from orbit. Earth had no comparable fleet. No empire behind it. No allies waiting in the dark. What they did have was memory. Humanity had once been underestimated before. By empires long since fallen. From Thermopylae to Stalingrad, from resistance movements to revolutions, they had written their history not in victory, but in endurance. They did not need to match the Zephyrians ship for ship. They only needed to remind the galaxy of what happened when humanity was cornered. Months before the fleet arrived, construction drones were dispatched across the solar system. On the far side of Mars, in the asteroid belt, even drifting beyond Pluto, they built illusions. Cities. Perfect replicas of Earth's greatest metropolises, New York, Beijing, Lagos, Sao Paulo, holographically projected, structured with hollow towers and empty streets. Entire worlds of glass and shadow, meant to burn beautifully when the Zephyrians struck. To the enemy's sensors, they looked alive. Heat signatures. Radio traffic. Atmospheric noise. All carefully simulated. To the human eye, they were silent stage sets, waiting for the curtain to rise. The plan was cruel. When the Zephyrians came, they would not be attacking Earth itself. They would be attacking shadows. And humanity would be waiting. The day came without warning. One moment, the skies above Earth were clear. The next, gravitational anomalies spiked across the system. Space itself seemed to bend. And then, they arrived. 50,000 Zephyrian ships emerged from the void like a storm. Formations stretched across millions of kilometers, their silver hulls blotting out the stars. Civilians across Earth watched as every broadcast carried the same chilling image, the largest fleet in recorded galactic history descending on a single world. For a heartbeat, humanity seemed small again. Fragile. And then President Carter's words broke the silence. Come and take it. The Zephyrians moved with the arrogance of long habit. Their sensors locked onto the decoy cities. Plasma beams lanced out, shattering towers, burning streets, reducing entire replicas to glowing ash. To their commanders, it was a flawless victory. But the cities were empty. From hidden stations in the asteroid belt, human forces struck. Mines disguised as drifting rocks detonated in brilliant arcs, tearing holes through the vanguard. Stealth ships, built in silence over decades, decloaked and fired concentrated railgun rounds at the enemy's carriers. For the first time in 500,000 years, Zephyrian ships fell by the dozens. Panic rippled through their fleet. The Zephyrians had always relied on fear, on the belief that resistance was futile. But now, their enemies were not fleeing. Humanity was not crumbling. They were fighting. The false cities continued to draw fire, pulling the collective deeper into the trap. Human fleets flanked from the dark, striking supply vessels and command ships. Orbital defenses, thought primitive, unleashed kinetic strikes with devastating precision. Still, the cost was terrible. Human ships shattered. Crews were lost in silence, their names carried only in whispered prayers across comms. The Zephyrians fought with monstrous strength, and for every ship that burned, 10 more pressed forward. But something was shifting. For the first time, the collective bled. And the galaxy was watching. Across alien networks, forbidden feeds of the battle spread like wildfire. Oppressed worlds huddled around stolen transmitters, watching the impossible unfold. The Zephyrians, once thought untouchable, were burning. Rodriguez's voice carried across the fleet, make them remember. And they did. Every strike was calculated not only for victory, but for spectacle. Every explosion framed against the backdrop of false cities, every burning carrier a message to the galaxy, the old order is breaking. What began as survival was becoming something greater. Humanity was not just defending Earth. Humanity was rewriting the story the galaxy told itself about power. At the heart of the storm stood the Zephyrian flagship, a vessel older than human civilization, armed with weapons that could sunder moons. It turned its fury toward the real Earth at last, preparing a final strike. But it never came. Chen's teams had anticipated the move. A hidden flotilla, buried in the shadow of Europa, surged forward. Every railgun, every missile, every ounce of firepower humanity possessed converged on the flagship's core. The ship shuddered. Shields collapsed. A single, brilliant explosion tore through its hull, splitting it in half. The flagship that had once leveled civilizations died in Earth's skies. The galaxy would never forget the image. Silence followed. The Zephyrian fleet, broken and leaderless, fell into disarray. Some ships fled into the dark. Others fought on, desperate and doomed. By the battle's end, the void above Earth was filled with wreckage, tens of thousands of ships reduced to debris. Morrison stood on Luna Base, eyes hollow with exhaustion. "We've won," he whispered. But Chen shook her head. "No. We've survived. Because victory was never the true goal. Survival was. And in surviving, humanity had done something far greater. They had shown the galaxy that the Zephyrians could bleed. That the impossible was not impossible. Across the stars, oppressed civilizations stirred. Rebellions long buried began to whisper. If Earth could stand, perhaps they could too. The galaxy had expected another broken world. Instead, it had witnessed the birth of a legend. And yet, deep in the silence that followed, Morrison felt unease. The Zephyrians had fought hard, but not as hard as they should have. Something in their strategy felt restrained, incomplete. Almost as though they had been testing humanity. Measuring them. The thought chilled him more than any battle. As the fires burned in orbit, President Carter addressed not just Earth, but the stars. Her voice carried across captured channels, echoing in the homes of billions of alien beings. Humanity does not seek conquest. We do not seek empires. But we will not bow. Not to the Zephyrians. Not to anyone. Let this battle be remembered, for today, Earth stands free. The galaxy listened. Some with hope. Some with terror. And somewhere, in the dark beyond known space, something older stirred. Watching. Waiting. The age of silence was over. The smoke of battle still lingered in orbit when the galaxy realized what had happened. 50,000 ships, an armada so vast it could have crushed a dozen worlds, lay broken and burning across the dark. Humanity, a species the galaxy had barely known existed, had faced the Zephyrian collective at its strongest, and left them in ruin. No one believed the reports at first. Whispers carried across the stars, primitive humans, they said, had destroyed one of the oldest war machines in the Orion arm. But the wreckage told the truth. Zephyrian escape pods drifted aimlessly. Their flagship was torn in half, its final transmission an endless scream of static. For the first time in 500,000 years, the galaxy felt something new, something it thought had been long buried. Fear. Admiral Vexer's death rippled through the Zephyrian collective like a blade. Entire sectors descended into chaos as once loyal commanders questioned their strength. Civilizations they had ruled for generations rose in rebellion. The iron grip of empire was beginning to slip. And at the center of it all was Earth. President Carter's words, replayed across every channel, "Come and take it," became more than defiance. They became legend. Across alien networks, across hidden colonies and oppressed worlds, those three words carried weight. If humans could resist, if humans could win, then perhaps others could as well. Earth had not just defended itself. It had cracked the illusion of invincibility that kept the galaxy in chains. But victory brought no celebration on Earth. Morrison and Chen, back on Luna Base, studied the silence that followed the battle. The Zephyrians had not retaliated, not yet. Their empire was vast, their resources nearly endless. Why had they not struck again? Rodriguez believed the answer was fear. Humanity had shown its teeth. No empire, no matter how old, wanted to lose face twice. But Morrison suspected something else. He had watched the enemy fleet die, and something about it unsettled him. The battle had been too easy, not for the soldiers who fought it, not for the cities that burned in the illusion, but too easy for a war that was meant to decide the fate of Earth. It felt less like a final blow and more like a test. A probe. It was then that a transmission came, from a species humanity had never met. The Harari. They were not warriors. They had no fleets, no armies, no empire. They were wanderers, archivists of memory, collectors of knowledge. For centuries, they had survived by moving unseen, staying far from the great powers of the galaxy. Their message was simple. Their voices trembled. You must not celebrate, the Harari said. The Zephyrians were not the true danger. They were only caretakers of a prison far older than your world. And by defeating them, you may have broken the lock. Morrison pressed for answers. Carter demanded clarity. But the Harari would not, or perhaps could not. Say more. They spoke of the architects, and then fell silent. The name itself carried weight, as though it had been whispered across the galaxy for ages but never spoken aloud. The Harari described them only in fragments. They were not conquerors in the way the Zephyrians were. They were something older, something that moved in cycles spanning millennia. Entire civilizations had risen, thrived, and vanished under their shadow. The galaxy's empires, its rules, its wars, all of it was shaped by the remnants of architect design. They built, the Harari said, but they did not build for us. They built for themselves. And when their work was complete, they always returned to claim it. And now, with the fall of the Zephyrian fleet, the Harari believed the architects would awaken once more. President Carter stood at the window of the White House, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, something far older than humanity's defiance was stirring. She had led her people through fire, and they had stood unbroken. But even victory brought no peace. What was the purpose of survival, she wondered, if survival only brought them closer to a greater darkness? In Luna Base, Amy Chen looked over the wreckage maps again. Something in the Zephyrian ships bothered her. Their data cores had been stripped. Whole sections of memory banks deliberately wiped before destruction. It was as though they hadn't come to conquer Earth at all, but to watch. Rodriguez asked the question none of them wanted to voice. What if Earth wasn't the enemy? What if Earth was the trigger? And then, it happened. Not in orbit. Not in the skies above Earth. But deep in the void, beyond the rim of known space. A pulse. Not light, not sound, but something stranger, an ancient signal that moved faster than physics should allow. Across dozens of worlds, alien sensors flared. Old machines buried in forgotten ruins began to hum. The Harari, watching from the shadows, wept. The architects had heard. No one knew what form they would take, or how long before they arrived. But one truth was clear, the galaxy was no longer living in the age of empires. It had entered the age of something far greater. On Earth, humanity stood at a crossroads. They had won their first war. They had shattered an empire. They had become a symbol of resistance for countless species across the stars. But symbols were fragile. Victories could be undone. And legends could fade. As Morrison looked once more into the darkness beyond the solar system, he felt both pride and unease. Humanity had been underestimated for so long, by their enemies, by the galaxy, even by themselves. But power invited attention. And attention invited danger. The question now was not whether humanity could survive the galaxy. It was whether the galaxy could survive humanity, once the architects returned.